I'm not going to talk for too long by way of an introduction, but I do want to say I want to talk about the very first time I came across the poems of Jeremy Over. I feel that John just described me as an old friend, and I think that there's a kind of longevity to my friendship with Carcanet, my friendship with Jeremy. Jeremy and I had a kind of like significant moment in the history of our publication when we were both included in the Carcanet anthology New Poetries 2, which came out in 1999. And I remember perhaps 12 months before that book came out, I was meeting Chris Gribble, who at the time was working at Carcanet, for a drink after work. And we were both living in Manchester at the time. And Chris came into the pub really excited, and he said, I've got some poems that are also going to be in New Poetries 2 alongside yours and many other great poets, and presented me with a fistful of Jeremy's poems, which blew my mind in a way that Jeremy's poems have continued to blow my mind for what's over a quarter of a century since. We're here tonight to celebrate Jeremy's fourth book with Carcanet. And what's amazing about Jeremy is that there's very much a recognizable style to what he does. But if it's recognizable, it's never predictable. And part of the joy of Jeremy's poems is that anytime you think you know where they're going, or you think you know what's going on, there's a little moment of joy, a little detour, a little sort of false footstep or something that can be absolutely hilarious in all kinds of ways, can be very surreal, can bring you back to yourself. So tonight I was so excited when I got asked to be part of this launch event. So as John has said, I'm going to hand over to Jeremy, and I'm probably as excited as anyone in this room to hear Jeremy read. It's been some time since I've heard him read, so I'm very excited to hear the reading, and then I'll be back before too long to join Jeremy in a quick discussion before we hand over to the room. So everybody, would you please join me in welcoming Jeremy over?
Thanks very much, Matt. Lovely kind introduction. And thanks, John, and thanks everybody who's out there. I'm sorry I can't see you, but if everything's gone to plan, there may be people in India, New York. My brother-in-law in Borneo deserves a prize for getting out of bed at 2:30 in the morning, I think, over there. And there's people down in my kitchen as well I can hear. So that's great. Choosing what to read from this book hasn't been easy. It's more of a book than my previous ones in some ways, rather than a pile of poems. There's long sequences which link together, so it's quite hard to pick things out from that. So I've gone for a sort of a collage approach, which fits with quite a lot of my poetry, going back and forth in the book, partly because I tend to read books a little perversely like this when I pick them up in a bookshop or library, dipping in and out, and partly a result of watching too much of the BAFTA Awards ceremony the other day, maybe. But all those bewildering short bursts from lots of different films, interspersed with awkward attempts at comedy. And I thought, why can't poetry readings be more like that? I hope I can give you a taste for the book anyway. What I'll do is I'll say a bit about the four sequences that I'll be reading through in patchwork. And that they're firstly a poem called Equinox in a Box. This is a journal type poem tracking a day from dawn to dusk, spent within a James Turrell sky space in the Yorkshire Sculpture Park. It's also spliced in some writing from another solo retreat I made in the Cairngorms once. If you haven't been in a Tyrrell sky space, Tyrrell's an artist who works with light in different ways. He has a Quaker background, so that light is sort of metaphorically important for him as well. And his sky spaces are installations. They're box-like rectangular spaces with a bench running around the sides and no roof or ceiling. So you sit and gaze up at the sky. They're fantastic spaces for contemplation, for watching the color of the sky changing and the movement in your mind. I really recommend them. The second poem is a prose poem about my father, who died when I was young. I was just over 3, so I have no real memories of him. The origins of the poem are in a photo taken of him kind of playing the fool on a picnic the day before he died unexpectedly on holiday. And there are 2 parts to that poem, with one being a sort of childhood dream response to the other part. The third sequence is an essay really about reading and unexpectedness and waywardness, which has a short interlude with lots of snowdrops and bees. I'll read from that sequence. And the last sequence is called Yes, and that's an erasure of a Victorian book for children, kind of a morally improving book for children about the art of seeing things and being attentive and curious, which after my erasure becomes more about what you might see or hear freshly when you blot out some of the linguistic landscape with Tipex. I don't know if our document is ready yet. It's a little bit bigger earlier. Not to worry. If you don't mind me squinting in, I'll start. Equinox in a box. I have a rectangle I must fill. Ron Padgett, rectangle obligation. 4:35. Go inside to greet the light, she used to say. So here I am, out of the dark. But inside what? I'm wondering about a few things. What that humming is, for instance. It's the light. Whether to wear glasses or not. Would that be one frame too many for the sky? And how do you focus on light in the sky anyway? Whoops. 4:41. On the concrete floor, there is the dark outline of a rectangle burned into it, corresponding to the aperture in the ceiling, where Yorkshire rain has dripped down from its edges all winter. 4:57. Like being the first to walk across a lawn freshly covered by snow, I feel I've spoiled this space in a way that the dead leaves and ash seeds scattered across the floor has somehow managed not to. The ceiling is imperfect too, slightly. There's a crack in the white paint in one corner of the rectangle. Dry lips cracked in the corner of the mouth. A sign of overexposure to sunlight? Or saliva? Rain? Heather, rock, lichen, water. All human life takes place at the bottom of an ocean of ever-changing light. This is where I will stay. 5:15. Crows 3 times. A hint of blue in the black. An apple in the corner. A plane somewhat grumbling. The fingers and nose. 2 rocks in the pool. The tiny grey spiders on the rocks and lichen. Bees and more planes every now and then. On the way here, I follow a deer and a stone chap. I ask a wren if this is where he hides out, and he promptly vanishes. The rectangle on the diagonal now, and thus a diamond. The black triangle in the window represents the Eiffel Tower. A hungry feeling came over me stealing. All the mice were squealing in my prison cell. The old triangle went jingle jangle all along the banks of the Royal Canal. 5:20. Royal blue? There is no way to get this wrong. I can just sit here and wait. I don't even have to wait. And in one swoop, I got the message. Put the lawnmower in, put the shovel in. Jerusalem artichoke. A candidate in Bolsover, wavering. The world is not a predetermined set of facts. We construct the world with our observations. 5:33. Doves. In working with light, what's important to me is to create an experience of wordless thought. Such a festive blossoming. Utsiki mutsiki dutsiki, rutsiki putsiki book. And responsible for all this was her 4-month-old Sanka, lying naked on her bed, making bubbles with his mouth. 5:35. Definitely blue. An Eve Klein blue, the kind that makes you want to throw yourself out of a first-floor window. Jackdaws out of the jackdaw trapdoor. 12 months now since you didn't wake to greet the light. You have to look away and then back a few minutes later to notice the color changes. Paler blue now, and so quietly, grief roaming, like this invitation to look upwards. That's not where heaven is, though, is it? After sitting in the heather, it springs back gradually, sprig by sprig. Jumping now to the in the middle of things poem. The apples in heaven upstairs are all felted. The green door at the end of the hallway too, with the light from a small gin right-angled around the door frame. Lined up on the window ledges of the attic bedroom, the scullery maids are little bottles of poison. Surrounded by slaughter, the fox on the landing is breathing in its still life. The stair rods are coming loose, the stair carpet unstitching. Your breath unleavens the bread, part red sea, part red left field, right field, a fern unfurling a swallow at the back of the mouth. A broken jar of horseradish leads to the outdoor lavatory where a stone at the back of my tongue drops down the well as I rise up in the opposite direction, bolt upright in a bucket of water. Swallows saliva, solvitur ambulando, breathing very carefully. The ambulance is driving too slowly over the golf course, amongst the swallows, towards the one I can't put together. Back to Equinox in the box. Let's talk about something else. Do I miss you? Do you miss me? What's missing in here? The Today program, Syrian refugees, the European Union, a pied wagtail, the sight but not the sound just now. Porcupine medicine with the news made from nothing but scraps. 6:14, sky fading now, minute by minute. Not so different from its frame. Would you call that white? Thoughts don't seem so much like clouds, quicker to gather and then disperse. Clouds are slower. This is a good place to drink water and piss in the heather. Pissing is something that no one else can do for you. Only you can piss for yourself. Lichen is like neural pathways or a small forest. We know that already. One wheat ear on a rock comes close, hopping from one island to another. Beautifully marked wing beats and the close smell of the hand. 6:39, bog myrtle, headlamps, stroke my belly. What I need is to find another place a long time ago, another day even. Birds are accustomed to day now. Wind patterns rise on the pool. There is a sense of clearing, but a sense in what? And what is a clearing? A clearing in what? In what sense a harebell? In the sense of a gift in a packet of seeds. Thank you, Jonathan. And now Mulberry banks have changed perspectives as the land quietly undulates by the sea, which is the noise in my ears in bed at night. A bright yellow horsefly and our expectations of natterjack toads rise and fall in the dunes, giving Quakers the secrecy they need in which to get married. It is a joy to be hidden, but disaster not to be found. 6:48. Home safe now, night love. Lost soul I am without you. Spoilt with yellow, gorse or pencil. There needs to be a release, a break, a walk away, a renewal. Moving the snowdrops. One snowdrop on one snowdrop on. Snowdrops on one. Snowdrops on snow. One snowdrop, one drop. Snowdrops on one. And so on and so on. So on snow. The unbelievable lightness of snowdrops, their inconceivableness. They're not capable of being imagined or grasped mentaliness. You wouldn't really want to grasp snowdrops physically, though, would you? Or maybe you would. Maybe a bee would too, I imagine, but I wouldn't. Something seems already to have eaten quite a few of the petals, and I wouldn't want to see any more of them come to harm. I'm told they're a lifesaver at this time of year for any bee adventurous enough to wake up early and see what's about, I'm told. Like a life belt wedged securely around the bee's fat belly of its sentence. I'm told I can say that as often as I like, I'm told. Sentences are not emotional, but paragraphs are. I can say that as often as I like, and it always remains as it is, something that is. I said I found this out first in listening to Basket, my dog drinking, and anybody listening to any dog's drinking will see what I mean. Gertrude Stein. I imagine many things are hard to imagine for a bee. Sentence, basket, life belt, any dog's drinking. I am old, I am old. Is there anybody listening to a bee drinking from a snowdrop? Yes and yes. I got upon the open air on every side, so free flowers at least, kerchief, gorse, broom and bell will beg you readily. Some stones eat some great numbers. Snowdrops, lots of them. I decide I'll count every one in this garden as a kind of meditation, but there are more than I thought. I give up after 54. There must be maybe 2,000 to 3,000. More than 54 anyway, a lot more. They're looking with their heads hanging down in a sense of shame. Whoops. It's not a shame, it's a leak. With a study lamp trying to illuminate a few dead leaves. So many study lamps failing to make much of an impression in this grey February. Putting the empties out, putting our heads together, under the hairdresser's dryers, reading magazines listlessly, listening to tinnitus, looking at snowdrops. Do not ask for whom the bells. Is a thin stream of urine in late February in the song of the hedge sparrow, i.e. a sample of song, for whom this is a top spot for snowdrops. Now shop for snowdrops. From bicycle clips to cowslip, too slow, cowslip, 2 slow cow's lips, a slow kiss in Rye's lips. A flock of flying fancy spoke, as if one was broken, and often overshoes. Falling in with turf, a good deal of turf. But this is turfy much turf, are they not? Well, what an extensive ridge of hills. I mean, what? But here is a splendid anapestic poem by a 4-year-old boy who had just learned the meaning of the word always. Let there always be a sky, let there always be a sun, let there always be a mama, let there always be a me. I'm letting a fly walk on my ear, little feet. 2 newts, the male, I think, is gesturing with his tail alluringly, like this. Wait a minute, more like this. The love of adjectives is noticeable. Sun out again, strokes my forehead. Eduardo Paolozzi, even Eduardo, is unafraid of being influenced. Where does that leave Where Am I, Kenneth, writing in nature for the newts, or whatever they're wafting on the first day of spring, badoing, badoing. If you're not confused, you're not paying attention, he yelled. Meanwhile, we are at home with the artist Damien Hirst, for whom relationships have been reduced to a ping-pong ball, a glass, and different amounts of water, and his signature. For the rest of us, thankfully, things remain more complex and anonymous. Midges bubble up and down in the shafts of sunlight. What are they doing? Dancing, feeding, making themselves attractive? Compton B, Thomason J.C., McLachlan A. Mating in a viscous universe, the race is to the agile, not to the swift. Proceedings of the Royal Society. Fresh air daily. Bright, unfiltered light. There are no pictures on the wall. Outside the chapel, there's something I like about the gravity of this thick-set contemplative. A weighty friend, perhaps, just sitting on a park bench and totally unconcerned with the aesthetics of gazing. But what's next? From the hill, I runs into the river, tall, flowering plunger larch. A great many large, but how I long to hover. With some orange, somewhat short. In the middle of things. Excuse me. He walks carefree towards the cliff edge, looking up into the sky. Over his right shoulder, tied to the end of a staff, he carries his worldly belongings in a small satchel. Between his left thumb and forefinger, he holds a white rose. The sun is shining. A white dog accompanies him on the brink of the precipice, laughing and leaping at his feet. Behind them, jagged, icy peaks rise up on all sides. The fool is zero, all potential. He's at the beginning of something new, a journey that's needed into the unknown. Started in innocence, he isn't taking a leap of faith so much as just one more step, in faith that the ground or something or someone will be there still to support him. He has no need to look down. What he's looking for is in the sky. Everything has been leading up to this point and the next step. The dog seems to suggest that that step will be fine. What does it know? How to surrender in faith, to leap and roll. How not to look before you leap. And here's a photo of my father taken the day before he died, standing in a field a long way from any cliffs or icy mountains, not stepping out, but posing for the photo, burdened by the paraphernalia of picnics, holding in his left hand 2 deck chairs, a newspaper, and something I can't make out. In his right, a camping gas canister, and between his teeth, the handle of an aluminium teapot. He's not looking for anything, just at my mother behind the camera, for whom he smiles. There is no need for faith to take his next step. Should he fall, safety of soft ground is there for him. He's not at the start of a new journey, nor at the end of one. He's in the middle of things, in a field where happiness lies, and a picnic lunch. And back in the box, Equinox in the box. And when he walks, they walk with him. They walk with him? If you only believe in the individual, in what you are, then life is a tragedy that ends in death. As Wolfgang mistakes a grouse for an eco-psychologist collecting hazelnut pollen. Steps crunch softly, rustling and soft scraping. I love this work. It's something I do for hours and hours and days and days. It's a very quiet work. Soft scraping, soft splashing, soft rhythmic metallic tapping. 1774, Mrs. Snook's tortoise came out of the ground, but in a few days buried himself as deep as ever. 1778, crocuses blow. 1782, the wheat ear is seen on our down. 1783, water sinks in Thomas White's field. After a hard day at the counting house, freshly robed, they would sit on the terrace in silence and allow cloud patterns to fill their heads for an hour or so. No one was permitted to comment as we did as children, "There's a giant," or "There's an elephant." One must eventually make a grown-up response to clouds. Thank you.
Hi, Jeremy. What a great reading! What a joy to hear those poems. I've really been enjoying spending time with the book over the last few weeks, and that seems to me a really sort of different experience to hear you doing that reading. I've got a couple of questions to do with, like we were talking before. You were talking before about this being a book of long poems. It's perhaps out of all your books, it's the one with the shortest contents page, and we've got these sort of longer sequences or sets, and I'm kind of don't know. I'm interested in how you put the book together. It's, to me, like in a way that was accentuated by the reading. It feels like a kind of a compendium of some kind, a little set of games that you're, or like a crazy golf course or something you can wander off in one direction, then come back and play around with something else. It's got all these lovely little, I don't know, like it's like a little house of fun or something. How do you put it together?
I love the crazy golf or house of fun idea. It started life at the, you remember quite a lot of it from my PhD that I did with you and Luke and Rona Graham. As the part of the creative part of that, of the research. I don't know if that gave me permission to go on a bit in length, and I don't know, as well as being sort of longer pieces which talk to one another a bit more than other poems. There's possibly more aboutness about the poems, if you like. There's kind of a slowly coming around to there being content in my poems. That doesn't sound weird. I'm not just playing formal games, although I like crazy golf. That I want to say some things, and the advice giving is only half mock serious. I am starting. I've read so many self-help books over the years. I think it's starting to leak into it. But no, the length. I guess I've been inspired by other poets like yourself, going on with really working through formal experiments, stretching them out, and just not looking over your shoulder, just going ahead with that incredibly sort of quite bravely. And I've loved other poets like Kenneth Coke. I love his long poems, wanting to include the whole world in his poems. He had this sort of ambition to always to write a poem about everything. That was inarticulate, but some of the
I think Kenneth Coke is a pertinent point because, like as I said, like it feels like there's an evolution in your first two books. It is all shorter poems, not tiny poems by any means, but then in your previous book, Fur Coats in Tahiti, the first half is shorter poems, and then the second half you begin to reach into the sequences comparable to the ones in Fourth and Walnut. And in fact, you've got the Kenneth Coke poem in there, haven't you? Kenneth Coke Uncorked, which is a beautiful use of space. O's on the page for various pages. So tell us a little bit about the evolution, how you got to this point, if you don't mind casting back a little bit, or have you covered that already?
How did I get here? I think I've always been imitating other writers. Kenneth Coke again said something about loving being influenced, not having an anxiety of influence, but loving being influenced and playing with influence. So I think the first couple of books I was very much trying to imitate various poets, the New York poets and surrealists especially, and trying out quite a wide variety of different ways of writing a poem. I think there's some kind of a relaxation maybe in the last two books, although not writing out of anxiety anyway, but the stretching out. And I don't know, maybe now I'm going to start writing enormous books. Thomas Traherne was going to write that A to Z about the whole of the world, and he only got as far as B for Bastard when he died. So maybe I should tackle something huge like.
Well, I'm really interested in this idea of absorbing various influences and it being part of a bigger project. It feels like by now, but it seems to me there's always been something that we might tangibly describe as a Jeremy Ava aesthetic. Have you got a particular sense of what the poetic is to you? Like how do you know that something is poetic enough for you to go ahead and write it or to keep it? Have you got a yardstick?
I don't know really, and I don't know that I think very much about what's a poem and what's prose, or people get tangled up on prose poetry and flash fiction and different definitions. I guess I'm really interested in writing, and writing that surprises me or surprises itself in some way and freshens things up. I was going to say something about what you said at the beginning of that question, and I've forgotten what it is. Sorry.
Absorbing various
It
influences.
may come back. Sorry.
Was it absorbing various influences, or the longer project of, you know, these 4 books together seem to have a real magical bond, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, what you were saying about Jeremy Over. Actually, it was that.
Yeah.
When I think there's just that, I don't know who he is or what he is, but there's kind of an unavoidable thing. You're right. I've used various methods of avoiding myself and try to trick myself into writing a poem without thinking too much about it. But you do collage and using chance or Eulipian constraints, all these things that seem to tie your hands behind your back, and what should constrain your voice maybe doesn't, and what escapes from those rules and or methods, processes is something to do with the individual, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I'm about to say something in response to that. I want to flag up that in the chat right now, we've got lots of very complimentary comments about the reading and about the poems, but not too many questions as such. And I'm just prompting everyone else who's in attendance this evening, if you would like to ask a question, then go ahead and pop it in the chat or in the Q&A box, and I'll try and manage fielding those and handing them over to Jeremy. But can I pick up on what you were just saying about processes? I think it's a real joy to hear you read from Yes and Yes, and to see and to see like all the workings evident in the poems. Like, you know, it would have been possible to have just presented the text without the original context of the pages, the illustrations from the original book. So that's a poem in which the text is there's a source text which is very present in the final poem. So I'd love to hear a bit more about how you came across that book and how it struck you that was the thing you needed to do to it. But also, you know, there's a lot of process-based work going on. If you've got any stories about how you selected or came to write any of the other poems in the book, I'm sure we'd all be fascinated to hear.
That little booklet I've had for years. It was in a family holiday home that we had on the Cumbrian coast, and there's quite a lot of poems that have come out of that. There was a Boy's Own annual, which I took from in a kind of a collage in my first book, and I think various other things, these old books that there's a mysterious mystery around them. And this is this children's book, which is lovely illustrations by Brinsley Lafanu, but I obviously wanted to include. I don't think the words alone would have done much, and I wanted the Tipex to be there in a Tipexy sort of like that. It's Mary Ruefle, I don't know how you say her name, Ruefle, does this incredibly well. Erasures, she's done it for years. And I've done various other, that Kenneth Cope thing with the O's was another sort of extreme erasure, although with that I just wanted these O's to be floating like champagne bubbles on the page. And the Robert Herrick poem, Delight in Disorder, in the second book, was another erasure. I'd sort of had several goes at that poem, and called it Delight in Order. There's something that appeals to the kind of cheat in me that likes taking existing text and mucking about with it and stealing, taking stuff away and seeing what it reveals. And there's quite a history to erasure, isn't there, from what Tom Phillips in Britain,
Yeah.
but various other people have had a go as well. It's a lot of fun.
So
yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jeremy. Well, while we've been thinking about these processes, in particular with Yes and Yes, we've got a couple of questions that have cropped up. One is, can Jeremy talk about the illustrations, please? But also we've got, Jeremy, how do you see the use of, this is from Ian Seed, Jeremy, how do you see the use of pictures and photos in your new collection? And where do you see the relationship of poignancy with silliness in your work? Unique and quite beautiful to you.
Thank you again. Yeah, I seem to be, maybe I want to be a children's book writer, really. I don't know. I wrote that blog piece saying I wanted to be an animator, didn't I? What's wrong with poetry? It's nice. I've always loved poetry books that have looked various, just look different. I love James Tate's poetry, but I always felt a little bit sad at the kind of blockiness of his when I looked through a book of James Tate's poetry. It's wonderfully varied and superb stuff itself, but I keep on going back to Kenneth Coke. I loved the way his books just look so different on the page. And of course, he played around with comics and cartoons, along with various other New York poets as well. So that there's going to be that behind it partly. Yeah, it's just good to have pictures, isn't it? And not too many poems.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's something that is in your previous book as well, but I think you're sort of, I don't know, I love the variousness of the numerous illustrations in this book, if illustrations is the right word. But something that I'm very keen to ask you is about the title, Fourth and Walnut. Can you tell us how you got that title, please?
Yeah, I didn't, did I? I didn't explain that. Or I did in the video if people have seen that. It's a place, and it's at the corner of Fourth and Walnut that Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk and writer, in 1959 it was, had a moment of awakening and epiphany. He became aware that he loved, it's in a shopping district in Louisville, Kentucky, and he suddenly realized that he loved everybody that was walking around him, that he was theirs, and then that there was nothing could separate. He described the experience as a waking from a dream of separateness. And he also, which I quote from him in the first poem I didn't read from tonight, Advice to a Young Poet, which ends with the advice. He says that Thomas Merton saw everyone walking around like the sun, but there's no way of telling everybody this. And I suggested, why don't you try, to the young poet. But I guess that these corners of Fourth and Walnut, they're all around, if you like, in our lives. And maybe the book is looking for those. There's a little plaque in Louisville commemorating Thomas Merton's epiphany, and I sort of have a immodest ambition that there'll be little plaques everywhere that people read this book, you know, if they mystical awakening. It's not guaranteed, but popping up in different places, Zoom waiting rooms and bathrooms, bedrooms.
Brilliant. There's a couple of more questions in the chat that I'd like to feed into this conversation, if that's okay. From Jonathan Wooding, I've got, can you say something about mildew? Perhaps you need to contextualize that.
Don't eat it. Well, there's a kind of a concrete poem that blurts out in the middle of that Equinox in a Box poem, which was simply inspired, if that's right, by, you know, those little packets of crystals or something that you get in like laptop bags to avoid damp and mildew, presumably. And it said in several different languages not to eat the contents of this little bag, and it looked rather pretty, and I liked the language, and so I copied it loads of times in this concrete poem. So that's the mildew-proof piece, which is a kind of an interlude in that long poem in James Turrell's Sky Space.
I love the way that jumps into the middle of the poem. I've been scrolling all over my copy, and I've put this in the middle of that on the top of that page. I was really amazed by that little insertion. I'm going to carry on with the questions from the chat. Question from Marita Over. An awkward question.
Oh, no.
Are there any areas of experience / language worlds that you feel you would never venture into? And if so, what are they and why not? And what is your least favourite colour?
What is my least favourite
colour?
Black. Areas of language that I wouldn't want to. Well, the area of language that inspired me in a negative way for 30 years was working in the civil service and drafting replies to parliamentary and ministerial correspondence. That's probably the language that I'm quite happy to have left behind. I think I nicked a couple of bits in some early poems of a civil servant or a parliamentary language, but I'm not about to explore that further.
Brilliant. Great answer to a very good question. Another question, got from Martin Stannard here. Something we've touched on already, but I think it can stand being touched on again. Can you say something about the extensive use of text from other writers? As Martin says, there's a lot, and I feel there is such an extensive use that even though we've mentioned some of these texts and poems that grow out of them, I'd love to hear more, because it's a fascinating thing you're writing.
I've used other people's language quite a lot, but I mean always, usually in sort of collage or sort of Ted Berrigan styles, stealing maybe. But this book, there are quite big chunks. Maybe I was half thinking a little bit more of something like Lee Harwood in some of his poems. You would suddenly find quite a large quotation, and I think simply because he loved the quotation, and that's why I've done it. A bit like Thomas Merton's plaque, you know. It's a kind of a commonplace book in some ways. The first poem in the book in particular, but lots of the rest of it as well, that I'm gathering quotations from favourite writers and sharing them because I like them. I'm not sure if I'd do it again because it was kind of expensive. A huge hassle when it came to, because I realised some of these people had inconveniently not died long enough ago, I sort of punched the air one day when I realised when Gertrude Stein had died, and that it was okay to include chunks of her work without seeking permission or paying somebody. So my next poem and my next book, if there is one, probably will not have huge chunks from quoting people.
Brilliant. We're getting fairly close to our what is it? Our guillotine, I suppose, at the end of the evening. I'm going to hand back to John to close things off for Carcanet in a couple of minutes. Before we do that, we've got this might be the final question, depending on how long you take to answer it, from Kate Hodgson. You wrote that you like to tinker with some of your poems, even when the book therein has been published. Why do you know the poem is not finished?
Why do I know that the poem's not?
I love that question. Why do you know the poem is not finished?
Well, there's that thing about poems only being abandoned, I suppose, isn't there, rather than finished. That's kind of true, but I veer from quite obsessive compulsive to quite lax, I think. So I think there's some, I know that there's some sort of glaring errors in some of the poems that I would like to change all of a sudden. Others, yeah, just keep on and on and on. There's an Olympian game constraint, N+7, lots of people know, and there's a poem that by William Carlos Williams that I subjected to that, and I always want to change that again. It's a bit like it's just an ongoing, the poems are kind of a machine, and that particular constraint just keeps on throwing up new words, new ways that poem can be. So maybe they are living things, and I shouldn't feel so bad about wanting to keep on fiddling, even when they're out there and final.
Right, brilliant. You've answered that so concisely that I think we can sneak in one more question from.
I should have read more poems, shouldn't I?
We're worried about Mrs. Snook's tortoise. Why did it bury itself again? Even deeper too. Is it still there? Is it a metaphor for something we should all be fearful of?
Something deeply troubling. We'd have to ask, that's Gilbert White, isn't it? Who knows about Mrs. Snook's tortoise? No, I'll have to look that one up and get back to you.
Right, brilliant. And with that, I think we're just about on the chime of 8 o'clock. So I'm going to thank you, Jeremy, for what's been a wonderful reading and a wonderful evening. I'm going to thank Carcanet for inviting me to host this evening. It's been such a joy and a privilege to be part of it.
Thank you, Matt. Can I thank everybody? Can I?
Please go ahead.
Get Oscars-ish. Thank you very much to everybody, to you, Matt, for doing this, for Jazz for organising this, to Michael and John at Carcanet, and to Andrew for wrestling with this quite awkward book and making it very beautiful, lovely cover. And thank you to Marita for being my first and last reader, and quite often my only one.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.